Malik James stood before the granite gates of St. Augustine University, his worn but clean sneakers touching the glossy, stone-paved ground. The old backpack on his shoulders, hand-stitched with care by his foster mother Savannah, looked out of place amid the designer bags and expensive shoes glinting under the Los Angeles sun. At 19, Malik just wanted to study audio engineering, live quietly, and prove his worth without relying on anyone. But from the first glance, the campus screamed money and privilege, a world he knew wouldn't welcome him easily. Other students passed by, driving Teslas and Bentleys so shiny they might as well have been polished with cash, while Malik stood there, taking a deep breath and telling himself, "You've got this. You don't need anyone to know who you are." LeBron James, Malik's foster father, had made it clear the day he stepped into college. "You have to stand on your own, not lean on my name. The world doesn't care who you are, only what you can do." Malik etched those words into his heart. He was LeBron and Savannah's adopted son, taken in from a Cleveland orphanage as a toddler. Now he chose to hide his identity, refusing to play basketball despite having the skill to leave the school team speechless, and focusing instead on the drum beats echoing in his mind, the only thing that relieved his pressure. But he didn't expect that. From day one, the privileged world of St. Augustine was ready to make him a laughingstock. Malik stepped into the large lecture hall for freshman orientation. The crowd parted like oil meeting water, revealing a group in the center, led by Preston Whitmore. Preston was tall, with golden hair and a smile as bright as car headlights, but his eyes were cold as the cash in his father's safe. He was the basketball team captain, son of an LA real estate tycoon. With him was Tyler, son of a Hollywood director, with a nose so upturned he could smell failure from a mile away. And Brooke, daughter of a famous model, her glossy lips fresh from a photo shoot. Lastly, there was Jackson, another basketball player who trailed Preston like a shadow. They were St. Augustine's power quartet, and when Preston's gaze landed on Malik, a smirk curled his lips. "Look at this," Preston announced, his voice booming across the hall, turning a few heads. "This guy must have wandered in from the slums on a charity scholarship." Tyler guffawed, Brooke giggled behind her hand, and Jackson crossed his arms, nodding as if he'd just heard a top-tier joke. Malik stood still, his eyes narrowing behind his glasses. He didn't respond, silently memorizing each face, each word. In his mind, Savannah's voice echoed, "Patience, Malik. You don't have to fight to prove yourself." He adjusted his backpack and walked past Preston's group as if they didn't exist, finding a seat in the back row. But Preston didn't stop there. He relished this new game. At lunch, as Malik sat alone in a corner of the cafeteria with a simple tray of food, Preston and his crew approached. He held a coffee cup, pretended to trip, and dumped it straight onto the old laptop Malik was using to take notes. "Oops, sorry," Preston said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Guess you're not used to tech, huh?" Tyler burst out laughing, while Brooke pulled out her phone to snap a photo, whispering, "Post it for fun." Malik stared at the coffee pooling over the keyboard, his fists clenching under the table. He wanted to stand up, to wipe that smirk off Preston's face with a punch, but he remembered LeBron's words, "Don't let emotions control you. Play smart." So he wiped the laptop with a napkin, stood up, and walked away in silence. Malik's life at St. Augustine quickly split into two parallel worlds. By day, he was a quiet student, dodging stares and mockery from the crowd. By night, he escaped to a small jazz club in LA's Old District where no one knew who he was. There, he wore a hoodie, gripped drumsticks, and let powerful rhythms wash away his stress. He called himself Shadow, a name he chose to stay anonymous. Only music understood him, and he didn't want anyone from school invading that world. On the third day, things got worse. Malik walked into his audio engineering class, his favorite subject, only to find his week-long group presentation wiped from the school's online system. An anonymous text popped up on his phone. "A scholarship won't save you, trash." He gritted his teeth, certain it was Preston and his crew. But instead of lashing out, Malik opened his phone's recording app, checking the audio he'd secretly captured from earlier taunts. He'd learned from LeBron that evidence was the strongest weapon, and he was building an arsenal Preston didn't suspect. In gym class later, Preston tried to provoke him again. He hurled a basketball hard at Malik's chest while he stood off the court, refusing to join in. The ball hit, forcing Malik back a step, but he didn't fall. Professor Carter, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and the build of a former athlete, stepped forward. "You okay, James?" he asked, his sharp eyes flicking toward Preston. Malik shrugged, voice calm. "I don't play these games, sir." "Oh no," Preston laughed loudly, shouting, "He probably doesn't even know how to hold a ball, coach." But Professor Carter didn't laugh. He studied Malik longer than usual, as if sensing something in his stance. Steady, confident, like someone used to high stakes. After class, Malik sat alone in the library, a necklace engraved with LJ peeking out from his hoodie. Aaliyah, a black girl with curly hair tied high, approached his table. She worked as a library assistant and had noticed how Malik stayed silent through every bullying incident. "You can't keep letting this slide," she said, setting a stack of books down. "Preston and his crew won't stop." Malik looked up, flashing a cryptic smile. "Not yet," he replied, "but trust me, I know what I'm doing." That night at the jazz club, Malik played the drums like he was unloading everything. His hands flew across them like wind, powerful beats resonating through the small room. Another St. Augustine student, DJ Spin, happened to be there. Wearing a backward cap, his eyes lit up as he watched Malik. "Yo, Shadow," Spin called after the set. "You've got to join me for a secret gig this weekend. Talent like this can't stay hidden." Malik hesitated but nodded. "Fine," he said, "but keep it quiet. No one at school can know." Preston and his crew didn't realize Malik was documenting their every move. He thought he was the predator, but Malik was the one holding the rope, waiting to yank it tight. And when that moment came, when the truth of his adoption by LeBron James exploded, St. Augustine would shake. Karma was waiting around the corner, and it wouldn't show mercy. Malik James sat in a corner of the St. Augustine University Library, his old laptop now coffee-free thanks to a meticulous cleaning session the night before. His fingers danced across the keyboard, trying to recover the deleted audio engineering presentation. But in his mind, the drum beats from last night's performance still echoed. He'd been living two lives since stepping into this school. A quiet Malik, dodging scornful stares by day, and a free Shadow, immersed in music by night. But Preston Whitmore and his crew had no intention of letting him be. Each passing day, they found new ways to turn him into a joke, and Malik knew his patience was being tested to its limits. The next morning, as Malik walked into his audio engineering class, he discovered something worse than the deleted presentation. A fake email, sent from his account to the entire class, contained a ridiculous message. "Sorry I couldn't do the group work. I was too busy begging for scholarship money." Snickers erupted from Preston's group in the corner of the room. He sat there, arms crossed, his smile as bright as car headlights, his eyes cold as if he'd just won a high-stakes bet. Tyler, with his arrogant, upturned nose, whispered something to Brooke, making her laugh louder. Jackson, as usual, nodded along with Preston like a loyal dog. Malik clenched his fists under the table, but he didn't stand up. He opened his phone, checking the recording from yesterday. Preston's voice came through clearly. "This scholarship kid thinks he's so smart. Let's see how long he lasts." Malik smirked faintly. "Keep going, Preston. You're digging your own grave." Aaliyah, the library assistant, walked into class at that moment. She glanced at the fake email on her phone, then looked at Malik with concern. After class, she pulled him into the hallway. "Did you see that email?" she asked, her voice urgent. "Preston and his crew are playing dirty now. You can't keep staying silent." Malik shrugged, a spark of determination flashing in his eyes that Aaliyah hadn't seen before. "I'm not silent," he said. "I'm waiting." Aaliyah frowned. "Waiting for what?" Malik just smiled, not answering. He remembered LeBron, his foster father, saying, "The smart ones don't throw the first punch. They let their opponent fall on their own." And Malik was playing his own chess game. But Preston wasn't one to give up easily. He thrived on cornering Malik. That weekend, when Malik went to the audio lab to redo his presentation, he found his external hard drive destroyed, a clean, sharp cut sliced through its plastic casing. Nearby, a scrap of paper was taped to the desk with scrawled words, "Go back where you belong, trash." Malik stood still, his breathing heavy. He didn't need more proof to know who was behind this. But instead of erupting, he pulled out his phone, snapping photos of the note in the ruined drive. He'd learned from Savannah, his foster mother, that sometimes the best way to win was to hold on to everything, every scrap, every word, every action. The next day during elective gym class, Preston tried to provoke him again. He stood in the middle of the basketball court, spinning the ball on his finger like a pro. "Hey, scholarship!" he shouted, his voice echoing across the court, drawing the eyes of other students. "Why don't you try playing a game? Or do you only know how to sit at a desk begging for cash?" The crowd snickered, but Malik stayed on the sidelines, hands in his pockets. Professor Carter, the basketball coach, watched from a distance, his eyes narrowing as if assessing something. Preston hurled the ball hard at Malik, this time aiming for his face. Malik sidestepped, letting it whiz past and slam into the wall behind him. Preston's laughter rang out, but Professor Carter stepped forward, his voice low. "That's enough, Whitmore. Get back to practice." Preston shrugged, but his gaze lingered on Malik, like a hungry wolf eyeing prey. After class, Malik sat in the audio lab, trying to recover data from an old backup. Aaliyah appeared at the door, holding a coffee cup. "You okay?" she asked, setting it on the table. "I saw how Preston looked at you out there. He's not stopping." Malik nodded, but he didn't look up. "I know," he said. "But he's not the only one who knows how to play this game." Aaliyah tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" Malik finally looked up, that cryptic smile returning. "You'll see," he replied. That night at the jazz club in LA's Old District, Malik poured everything into the drums. His hands moved like wind, powerful rhythms reverberating through the small room, captivating the sparse crowd. DJ Spin, the St. Augustine student with a backward cap, stood in the corner, jaw dropped. When Malik finished, Spin clapped loudly and approached. "Shadow, you're a genius," Spin said, voice buzzing with excitement. "This weekend, I've got a secret gig at school. No one knows who's behind the curtain. You've got to join me." Malik hesitated. He didn't want anyone at St. Augustine knowing about Shadow. But Spin pressed, "Come on, no one will recognize you. You wear the hoodie, play the drums, then disappear." "Perfect." Finally, Malik nodded. "Fine," he said, "but no one finds out it's me." The secret gig happened Friday night in a hidden corner of the St. Augustine campus. An old warehouse turned underground stage. Students gathered, dim lights casting shadows over the curtain, hiding the band. Malik stood behind the drums, hood up, face concealed, his hands starting the beat. When the music erupted, the crowd cheered. Spin manned the DJ table, syncing with Malik, and for that moment, Malik wasn't the scholarship kid they mocked. He was Shadow, a mysterious figure making everyone leap to their feet. But he didn't know that Brooke from Preston's crew was in the crowd, filming with her phone. She didn't recognize Malik, but that video would soon become a piece of a bigger puzzle. The following Monday, things escalated fast. Malik walked into the cafeteria and saw a large screen playing a doctored video. His image edited to look like he was begging on the streets, captioned, "Malik James, scholarship or beggar?" Laughter filled the room. Preston stood amid the crowd, clapping like a comedy director. "Look at this," he shouted. "This is why you don't belong here." Malik froze, his eyes darkening. He wanted to charge forward, to wipe that smirk off Preston's face forever. But he remembered LeBron's words, "Don't let them see you weak. Let them expose themselves." He pulled out his phone, opened the recording app, and started capturing every word Preston said. Aaliyah stepped up beside Malik, grabbing his arm and pulling him out of the cafeteria. "You can't just let this keep happening," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "They've gone too far." Malik looked at her, then at the recording on his phone. "I know," he said, "but this time I'm not just waiting." He had enough evidence, recordings, photos, fake emails. Preston thought he was the predator, but Malik had quietly set a trap. And when it snapped shut, all of St. Augustine would see who'd fall. That night, Malik sat in his dorm room, the LJ engraved necklace peeking from under his hoodie. He opened his laptop, starting to piece it all together. Every shred of evidence, every plan. Karma was waiting around the corner, and it was about to knock on Preston Whitmore's door. Malik James stood in his small dorm room, the desk lamp casting light on his old laptop, now filled with audio files, photos, and recordings, a stockpile of weapons he'd quietly built to take on Preston Whitmore. He was no longer the silent boy dodging scornful stares. After Preston's barrage of dirty tricks, From fake emails and a ruined hard drive to the humiliating video that spread through the cafeteria, Malik knew his waiting game was over. He'd been patient, heeding the words of LeBron James, his foster father. Don't throw the first punch. Let your opponent fall on their own. But now he'd make Preston fall, not with violence, but by playing the game on his own terms. St. Augustine University's sports festival arrived on a scorching afternoon, the campus buzzing with laughter, music, and the smell of grilled food from the stalls. Students gathered around the basketball court, where Preston Whitmore's team was showing off slick dunks to flex their prowess. Malik stood at the edge of the court, hands in his pockets, the LJ engraved necklace peeking out from under his hoodie. He had no intention of joining, but Preston spotted him. He strode over, spinning the ball on his finger like a pro, his smile as bright as car headlights, but his eyes cold as the cash in his father's safe. "Hey, scholarship!" Preston shouted, his voice booming across the court, turning heads. "Why don't you try playing a game? Or are you scared of embarrassing that charity scholarship of yours?" Tyler, Brooke, and Jackson stood behind him, snickering like a chorus of arrogance. The crowd began to murmur, a few pulling out phones to record. Malik stood still, his eyes narrowing behind his glasses. He wanted to refuse, to walk away like always. But then Preston stepped closer, shoving his shoulder hard enough to make him stumble back. "Prove you belong here, trash," Preston growled, tossing the ball into Malik's chest. The ball hit, but Malik didn't fall. He gripped it tightly, the familiar feel from backyard sessions with LeBron flooding back. The crowd went quiet, waiting. Malik looked up, his voice low but sharp. "Fine, but I'll play my way." Preston laughed loudly, thinking Malik had just dug his own grave. "Your way," he mocked. "Let's see what you've got besides begging for cash." Malik didn't reply. He turned to Professor Carter, the basketball coach, standing nearby. "Got any drums, sir?" he asked. Professor Carter frowned, but curiosity flickered in his eyes. "There's an old set in the storage room," he said. "What are you planning?" Malik smiled. "You'll see." 10 minutes later, the basketball court turned into a bizarre stage. An old drum set was dragged out, placed in the center, its tangled cords plugged into the event speakers. The crowd buzzed, confused about what was happening. Preston crossed his arms, smirking. "What, you gonna play music to lose? What a clown." But Malik ignored him. He stepped up to the drums, pulling his hood up, the same one he wore as Shadow at the jazz club. DJ Spin, who'd convinced him to perform the previous weekend, emerged from the crowd, mic in hand. "Who wants to see a real show?" Spin yelled, and the crowd roared. Malik sat behind the drums, gripping the sticks tightly. He started with a slow, deep beat, like the pulse of someone simmering with anger. Then the rhythm built, faster, stronger, blending with the bass from Spin's speakers. The crowd clapped along, the energy rising. Preston stood there, his smirk fading. Malik played like he was unloading everything. The taunts, the dirty tricks, the days he'd kept his head down. The drums thundered, drawing every eye, and then, in a sudden burst, he stood, ran to the middle of the court, grabbed the ball Preston had thrown, and slammed down a perfect dunk. Powerful, precise, unflinching. The court erupted. The crowd screamed, phones raised high to capture the moment. Malik landed, his breathing steady, his eyes locking onto Preston. He stood frozen, arms still crossed but face pale. "You think you're done?" Preston snarled, charging forward to shove Malik again. But Malik sidestepped, letting Preston stumble, nearly face-planting in front of everyone. Laughter erupted from the crowd, and this time it was aimed at Preston. Just then a low engine rumble sounded from the court's entrance. A sleek black SUV rolled in, the door swung open, and LeBron James stepped out. Tall, imposing, with a presence any basketball fan would recognize, he strode straight to the center of the court. The crowd fell silent, a few gasping, "That's LeBron!" Preston froze, his feet rooted to the ground. LeBron stopped in front of Malik, resting a hand on his shoulder, then turned to Preston. "Touch my adopted son again," he said, his voice low but loud enough for the whole court to hear, "and you'll deal with me." No one dared breathe. Preston's jaw dropped, his eyes darting as if searching for an escape. Tyler, Brooke, and Jackson backed away, blending into the crowd. LeBron looked at Malik, his gaze softening. "You did good, kid," he said quietly, just for him. Malik nodded, his heart pounding. Not from fear, but pride. He'd done it, not just with LeBron's name, but as himself. The video of the showdown, from the explosive drum beats to the flawless dunk and LeBron's arrival, spread across social media within hours. The hashtag #OneChanceKingSon trended on every platform, from Instagram to Twitter. St. Augustine buzzed, local news outlets started calling the school. Preston stood alone in a corner of the court after the crowd dispersed, clutching the ball but stripped of his arrogance. He'd lost, not just to Malik, but to a world watching. That night in his dorm, Malik sat with Aaliyah and DJ Spin, the three of them rewatching the video on his laptop. "You're LeBron James's adopted son and didn't say anything?" Aaliyah yelled, slamming the table. Malik chuckled softly. "I wanted to do something on my own first," he said. Spin shook his head, still in disbelief. "You played drums and dunked in front of the whole school? Then your foster dad rolled up like a superhero. Legendary." But Malik knew it wasn't over. Preston might be reeling, but he wasn't the type to give up. He'd come back, and this time, he'd be more dangerous. Malik opened the evidence folder on his laptop, recordings, photos, fake emails, and began sending them to the administration through an anonymous email. He didn't just want Preston to lose a battle, he wanted him to learn that privilege wasn't everything. The next morning, Malik walked into the cafeteria, head held high for the first time. The crowd stared, whispering, but no one dared laugh. Preston sat in a far corner, his eyes darkening as he saw Malik. He didn't know that, in Malik's hands, karma was ready to throw its final punch. And when it landed, all of St. Augustine would feel the tremor. Malik James walked into the St. Augustine University cafeteria the morning after the sports festival, for the first time not ducking his head to avoid anyone's gaze. The crowd of students was quieter than usual, hushed whispers rippling through the tables as he grabbed a tray and sat in his usual corner. The LJ engraved necklace peeked out from under his hoodie, no longer a secret. The video of his explosive drum performance and perfect dunk, capped by LeBron James stepping in to defend his adopted son, had swept across social media like a wildfire. The hashtag #WhyYourKingSon wasn't just trending in LA, it had gone national. But Malik didn't care about fame. He'd done what he set out to do, prove he wasn't just a scholarship kid for others to mock. Preston Whitmore sat in a far corner of the cafeteria, alone. No Tyler, Brooke, or Jackson flanked him like usual. His trio of power had dissolved right after yesterday's showdown, when Preston's shine was snuffed out in front of the entire school. He gripped his coffee cup tightly, his eyes darkening as they landed on Malik. But there was no arrogance left in them, only confusion and a flicker of something like fear. He didn't know that, last night, Malik had sent all the evidence, recordings of taunts, photos of the ruined hard drive, fake emails, to the administration through an anonymous email. Karma wasn't stopping at Preston's stumble on the court. It was gearing up for a full curtain call. That afternoon, news spread like wildfire. The administration called an emergency meeting with the basketball team and student council. Professor Carter, with the stern demeanor of a seasoned coach, stood in the center of the room, holding a thick stack of printed papers. "We've received evidence of bullying and vandalism on campus," he said, his voice low but cutting. "Those involved will be investigated, and the consequences will be severe." Preston, seated in the back row, went pale as the papers in Carter's hand. He knew he was the prime target, but he didn't know who'd sent the evidence. His eyes scanned the room, landing on Malik, sitting quietly in the corner, hands in his pockets. After the meeting, Preston was suspended from the basketball team immediately, pending the investigation's outcome. Rumors swirled that his father, the real estate tycoon, had called the school in a fury, not to defend his son, but to threaten to pull funding if the scandal tarnished the family name. But this time, money couldn't fix it. The administration, under pressure from social media and the press, had to act. Preston lost his captaincy, his posse of admirers, and for the first time in his life, he faced himself without anyone backing him up. Malik didn't celebrate. He didn't want to destroy Preston, just teach him a lesson. A few days later, while he was in the library working on his audio engineering presentation, Preston appeared unexpectedly. He stood at the door, his designer shoes now scuffed, his golden hair disheveled like he hadn't brushed it. James, he called, his voice hoarse. Malik looked up, saying nothing, waiting. Preston cleared his throat, his eyes wavering. I, I didn't know you were LeBron's adopted kid, he said, as if that was an excuse. I didn't mean to target you like that. Malik set his pen down, meeting Preston's gaze. You don't owe me an apology, he said. You think I'm here because of my dad's fame? I'm here because I earned it. What about you? What do you have besides your dad's money? Malik's words hit Preston like a punch to the face. He stood there, lips pressed tight, then turned and walked away without another word. But Malik knew a seed had been planted. Preston might not change overnight, but he'd never forget this moment. While Preston grappled with his downfall, Malik began to shine in his own way. Professor Carter called him into his office after gym class. You've got talent, James, he said, tapping the desk. I don't care whose adopted son you are. I saw how you played yesterday. Not just the dunk, but the confidence in every drumbeat. Join the team. Malik hesitated. He'd avoided basketball to escape LeBron's shadow. But Carter smiled. You don't have to be LeBron. You're Malik. This time Malik nodded. All right, sir. At the same time, Aaliyah and Malik teamed up on a new project. They convinced the administration to let them start a community music club, free for struggling students. DJ Spin volunteered as an instructor, bringing his DJ table to every meeting. The club quickly drew dozens of students, from those who'd been bullied like Malik to others just looking for a place to belong. Malik's drumming rang out at every session, no longer a secret, but a flame of inspiration. St. Augustine began to shift. Students who'd once stayed silent about Preston's behavior now spoke up. A group calling themselves the Shadow Crew, inspired by Malik's alias, started hosting discussions about inclusion on campus. Even Brooke, who'd once mocked Malik, showed up at a meeting, stammering an apology and admitting she'd been wrong. Tyler and Jackson faded from the scene, dodging trouble. But the biggest surprise was Preston. A month after the scandal, he started showing up at the library, doing his own work instead of paying someone else like before. He didn't talk to Malik, but once and when they crossed paths in the hallway, Preston gave a slight nod, not friendly, but a sign of respect. The school's end-of-term concert was the final flourish. Malik stood on a stage in the middle of campus, a gleaming drum set in front of him, a gift from the administration after the music club's success. The crowd of students cheered as he began to play, powerful rhythms blending with Spin's bass from the DJ table. In the front row, LeBron and Savannah sat quietly, brimming with pride. LeBron whispered to his wife, "He did it, babe." Savannah nodded, her eyes shining. When the performance ended, Malik stepped to the mic, his voice ringing clear. Family doesn't define you. It's what you choose to do with your life that does. The crowd erupted in applause, but Malik looked beyond, to the new students who'd walk through St. Augustine's gates in the future. They wouldn't have to bow their heads or live in fear, because he'd paved the way. Preston stood at the edge of the crowd, hands in his pockets, his eyes no longer cold. He didn't become Malik's friend, but he'd learned something money couldn't buy: respect. A few weeks later, Malik got a text from Savannah. "I'm proud of you, Malik. You fought your way." He smiled, gazing out his dorm window. He didn't need LeBron's fame to win. He'd done it with his own hands, from a Cleveland orphanage to the St. Augustine stage. And as he set his drumsticks down, he knew karma wasn't just punishment. It was a chance to change, for Preston, for the school, and for himself.